Okay, students, so we are on now 1.5, which is the volume of right pyramids and right cones. Now, something to remember is that with area, your units are squared. So if you're dealing with centimeters, it's centimeters squared, meters, it's meters squared, inches, it's inches squared, so on and so forth. Volume is different. It is cubed, okay, because we're talking about the amount of cubes that can fit inside an object. Now that's centimeters cubed, meters cubed, inches cubed, okay? Now, when we're talking about prisms, okay, so a right prism, it's important to understand what a right prism means. A right prism is simply something that has the top and the bottom shape. So top shape is the exact same as bottom shape. Okay, so this guy is a right prism because the bottom is a hexagon and the top is a hexagon. So this is known as a right prism. Technically, this cube would be a right prism, right? You have the bottom shape is a square and the top shape is the exact same as a square. If you look here, a cylinder, this is technically a right cylinder. This could also be argued as a right prism because of the fact that your bottom shape is the same as your top shape, okay? Now, there's something with prisms, volume of prisms, it's really easy to calculate. Okay, the volume of a prism is the area of the base just multiplied how tall it is. So volume equals the area of the base multiplied by the height of the object. So in this case, this would be we would be given the area of this base. You don't have to know how to find a hexagonal base area in Math 10C, but if you're given the area of this hexagon, you would just need to know the height to find the volume here. Same thing with a right cylinder, okay? Notice that the volume of a right cylinder, we are given that in our data sheet, okay? So if you go to cylinder here and you go over, you'll see pi r squared h. But recognize a cylinder is like a prism. It has the top and the bottom as a circle. What is the area of that circle? Well, the area of the circle is pi r squared. So that's the area of the base multiplied by the height. Okay, so that's where pi r squared comes from. It's just the area of the base multiplied by the height. And that's how all prisms work. Okay, so maybe let's do a quick question here. So calculate the volume of a right cylinder with a base diameter of 10 meters and the height of 5 meters. So let's draw a rough sketch of what this looks like. So we have a right cylinder and we have a diameter, which is straight across down here, of 10 meters. And the height here is 5 meters, okay? Well, notice you have this on your formula sheet, okay? So it's kind of nice. The cylinder volume is pi r squared h. But remember where they get that from. The volume of a cylinder equals pi r squared h. Just remember, pi r squared is the area of a circle. So this still follows our formula of the volume of a prism being the area of the base multiplied by the height. Area of your base, which is a circle, multiplied by your height. Only problem here is we are given diameter, but we need radius. The radius is simply the diameter divided by 2. So our diameter is 10 divided by 2, so that gives us 5 meters. Okay, so now we have everything to plug in. We can find the area of the base and just multiply it by the height. So our volume here will be pi, our radius is 5, squared, okay, don't forget to square it, multiplied by your height, which is 5. So here, how do we plug that in our calculator? This is where brackets become really important. So remember how to find your pi. Your pi is yellow, so press the yellow button and press the yellow pi. So pi, use your brackets. This 5 is being squared, so I'm gonna put 5 squared. I'm gonna close that bracket and then multiply by 5. So anytime I'm multiplying numbers, I wanna bracket the whole thing. So 5 pi squared times 5 is 392.7. I'm going to round it to a tenth, so 0.7. So 392.7, and that's meters. And remember, this is volume, so this is cubed. So finding prisms can be fairly simple if you know how to find the area of the base. Okay, and remember, a prism is where the shape is the same at the top and the bottom. Okay. Now you also need to know how to deal with cones. Okay, so a cone is, you can think of an ice cream cone. We also sometimes represent it as an inverted cone like this. Okay, and it is 1/3 pi r squared, so the radius of your circle, h, which is the height. Recognize this is not slant height. It is not this height here. Okay, it's not slant height. It's actually the height from straight from the top to the bottom. So you need to know how to use Pythagorean theorem if you're given this. Remember, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So where do I find that in my formula sheet? This is something you don't have to memorize. If you go to your cone, okay, we talked about how to find the surface area last unit or last section. Here's the volume here, 1/3 pi r squared h. Okay, so there's your volume. You don't really need to understand why all this works, but you will need to know how to solve for certain values here. Okay, so how to manipulate this formula in order to maybe solve for h. Anyways, this is your volume. So let's go to example 2. I'll get rid of this. So calculate the volume of a cone with a slant length of 6 centimeters and a diameter of 8 meters. So let's draw this first off. The cone looks something like this. Okay, and we're talking about the slant length. What is the slant length? Remember, slant length is this, 6 centimeters. Okay, this is the height of the cone. This is the slant length. And the diameter is 8 meters. So straight across here is 8 centimeters. Sorry, not meters. Now we're calculating volume of cone. So volume of cone, if we go back to our formula sheet, volume of cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. So let's write that out. Volume of our cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. So first off, we need to figure out what our r is. Well, how do we figure out r? Well, it's just the half of the diameter, right? So our diameter is 8. So r equals 8 centimeters divided by 2. So that gives us 4 centimeters. So right now we have r being 4 centimeters. Now we need height. Now some people might really jump the gun and automatically make this height. But remember, s is slant length, which is what this is. Height is this section here from straight at the top all the way to the bottom. Now, how do we solve for that? We'll recognize, recognize that there is a right triangle going on here. Straight down, straight across, and straight up. You have a right triangle. If we pull that blue triangle out and roughly draw it, it's going to look like this, where this is 6 centimeters. Now, what is this? Well, that is the radius. Okay, it's half of 8, so it's 4 centimeters, and here's our 90 degree. So we have to solve for h. That's what h is, right? This h is right here. How do we solve for h? Well, we're dealing with a right triangle. So remember, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, the only issue here is c is a hypotenuse, okay? So when we're not solving for simply c anymore. This has to be c. Your hypotenuse always has to be c. 4 can technically be a or b. I'm going to make this a. And then h is going to be b. Okay, so I'm just labeling some things here now. That being said, we're not going to plug 6 and 4 in and solve for c because c has to be the hypotenuse. We are solving for one of these numbers. So that means to solve for a leg, you have to take your hypotenuse and subtract it from the other leg. So this h squared, okay, h squared equals c squared minus a squared. Okay, and A is 4. So now we can solve for H pretty easily. I'm going to do an arrow, okay? So H squared equals C squared, which is 6, minus A squared, which is 4. Okay, and that equals 6 squared is 36, 4 squared is 16. So 36 minus 16, well, that's going to give us 20. Now, the big problem here is some people might automatically end it there, but remember, we just solved for H squared. So this means we're going to have to square root this, because at the moment, we have H squared equaling 20. So to finish this off, we need to square root both sides. So H equals the square root, and remember how to find that on your calculator. We want to square root a number, it's in the yellow, so we're going to press the yellow button. Second square root, so you can see a square root value came up, and we're going to do 20. Okay, and that gives us 4.47. Okay, so we have 4.47 now, which is H. So we solve for 4.47H. So now we have this height. We have the height, so we can solve for the volume. We just plug in these values. So let's do that. Volume equals 1/3 pi. What was R? R was 4 squared. H is 4.47. Now, how to plug all this into our calculator? You can do it one at a time, okay? So you could do this all at once, or you could do it one at a time. Doesn't matter to me. You could do, so bracket 1/3. So like that in your calculator. Make sure you bracket both sides, okay? Because this is one number, 1/3. Now I'm going to do pi, so second pi to get the yellow. So I have pi now, I'm going to bracket, okay, 4 squared, 4, and there's our square button. Okay, 4 squared, bracket, so now it's all closed. And then finally I'm going to bracket and put 4.47. Okay, so I'm bracketing all the separate numbers so I make sure I don't mess up my calculator, okay? So it's 1/3 times pi times 4 squared times 4.47. And that's going to give me 74.895. Now, I'm going to round this to the nearest unit cube. So I'm going to round it to 75 centimeters cubed. And there's our volume. Okay, so you really got to understand how to use Pythagoras theorem. If this part confused you, you got to come ask. Practice plugging this into your calculator because that's a huge important part of this whole unit. Okay, if you have any questions, please come ask for that. Okay, now moving on. For example, 3. Solve for side x in the following diagram of a right square pyramid. Only enter your number to 1/10 of a meter. Don't include units. We're going to include units. That's kind of strange. So we can erase that. I should probably erase that myself. But we're going to use units. You don't want to not include units unless this is on your Moodle page, which this question is very similar to one you'll find in your AFL. So we're solving for x here. This is a right square pyramid, okay? So a right square pyramid, and it gives us a volume. So let's go to a pyramid. And if we look at our pyramid, go to your volume. The volume is found here. The volume is 1/3 base of the area times height. Okay, so let's write that down. The volume for this guy is 1/3 base of area, or area's base, times the height. Well, what is the base area? What the heck does that mean? Well, if we look here, this is a square pyramid. So this bottom portion here is a square. This side is not only x, this side is x since it is a square. Okay, a rectangle, they're different side lengths, but these are the same. Let's talk about the area of a square. An area of a square is simply length times width. Okay, well, what is the length in this case? The length is x, so this is x, times the width, which is x. Remember, x times x is simply x squared. Okay, so right now the area of the base is x squared. Now make sure you understand that. We found the area of the base. It's x squared, right? That's what the area of a square is. So here, this can be represented as x squared. What is the height? Well, it gave us the height. Remember, this is the height from the very top straight down, not the slant height. We need the actual height, straight from the top down. And this will be 15.1 meters. And we're given volume, okay? So V equals 3,000 meters cubed. So we can plug all these in. 3,000 equals 1/3 x squared times 15.1. And look at that. Now you really need to know your simple algebra. How do we solve for this? Okay, well, what we can do is let's combine the numbers together. So right now everything's multiplying. And remember, this is a little aside. Multiplication, you can move around a little bit because like 4 times 5, well, that equals the same thing as 5 times 4, right? They both equal 20. So that means 1/3 x squared times 15.1 is the exact same thing as 1/3 times 15.1 x squared. See, we can just move these guys around, okay? If everything's just multiplying, we're totally able to do that. Let's figure out what 1/3 times 15.1 is. Okay, so I'm gonna bracket the 1/3 because remember that's being treated as one number. I gotta turn on my calculator. So see how I bracketed 1/3, okay? Then I'm gonna multiply it by 15.1. So times 15.1 times 15.1. So that gives me 5.0333. I'm just gonna put it to 3 3s there. So 3,000 equals 5.0333 x squared. Okay, you wanna, if it looks like this, you wanna carry along quite a few of the decimals, okay? Don't round it to 5 here because you're still working and trying to find the final solution. Now, how do I solve for x? Well, this thing is multiplying x, so we wanna divide it away. Remember, you do the opposite operation of what the number is doing. 5.0333 is multiplying x squared, so I'm going to divide to cancel it out. If this part is confusing you, you need to come in and ask for help, okay? This is gonna look a lot more difficult in later chapters. This cancels out, and you are left with 3,000 divided by 5.333. So 3,000 divided by 5.0333. That's going to give me 596.0304. 596.0304 equals x squared. We're not done. We have not solved for x yet. It's still being squared. How do you get rid of a square value? Well, the way you get rid of a square value is square rooting. So we square root both sides, okay? Square rooting is the opposite of squaring something. So here, second square root, right? That's where the square root button is. 596.0304. So there is our value, and we'll get x equaling 24, and it wants us to round it to the nearest tenth of a meter. That's 1 decimal place, so 24.4, because this is smaller than 5, so we just keep this as it is. 24.4, and what are the units here? Well, this is just a side length, and we're measuring in meters. So since it's just a side length, we just say meters. And there is the base, okay? So make sure you're coming in to ask for help if any of this is confusing, okay? Copy this down, rewatch it again if you're confused. If it's still confusing, please come and ask. Okay, let's do a few more questions. It looks like we've got 2 more examples to go through. I'm going to grab our data sheet and carry it down here. Okay, so solve for a diameter d in the following diagram of a right cone. Only enter your, again, we're going to include units. Solve for the diameter d in the following diagram of a right cone. Only enter your number to the 10th of a meter. So let's list everything we have. We have the volume of the cone. It's down here, 500 centimeters cubed. We're trying to solve for the diameter. Okay, so what can we do here? Well, this is a hint. Let's look at what the equation for a volume of a cone is. Find your cone right here. The volume for that cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. So let's see here. Volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. Now, do we have height? We sure do. Remember, this is the slant height, this is the height, okay? So we have h. We do not have radius, but we have all the other values. We have h now, we have volume. We could solve for r, we could find what r is, and the diameter simply equals 2 times the r, right? So let's plug these values in. Volume is 500 equals 1/3 pi. What was r? We don't know. We're going to solve for that. So I'm going to leave it as r squared, and then h is 11.5. Okay, so we got 11.5 here. Now again, simplify this a little bit. Combine all the numbers you can. Remember, they're all multiplying, so we can move it around a little bit. This will be 1/3 times pi times 11.5 r squared. Okay, remember, if it's multiplication, you can flip-flop the numbers. Let's plug this into our calculator and see what we get. So remember, I'm going to bracket that 1/3 in my calculator. So I get 1/3, okay? Pi, so second pi. And then r, well, we're not, and then times 11.5. So everything's bracketed. Practice putting that in your calculator, please. So 11.5. And we're gonna get 12.04277. So I'm gonna round this to quite a bit. I'm gonna go all the way to this 7 here, okay? So 500 equals 12.04277 r squared, okay? Now again, get rid of the things that are multiplying first and then deal with the square. So how do I get rid of this multiplication? Remember, you do the opposite. What is this number doing to r? It is multiplying. So let us divide. So divide 12.04277, divide 12.04277. Okay. If you divide this out, that gives you 1. So you're left with r squared on this side. Oh boy, sorry. Technical difficulties, there we go. So this is gonna leave you with, again, this will leave you with just r squared on this side. Now we gotta divide 500 by that number. So 500 dividing 12.04277, so we can see there, that gives us 41.5868. 41.5168. Okay, so we rounded it to quite a few decimal numbers because we're not done yet. Now remember, this isn't what r equals, this is what r squared equals. So we have to, oh my goodness, get rid of that square symbol. And how do we do that? Remember, you square root. So this should always be the last thing you pretty much have to do, is square root if it's being squared. Okay, and then that gets rid of the square. So r equals, well, we're going to square root this number. So second, find the square root. It's yellow, so you need to press second first. Okay, and we're plugging in 41.51868. 41.51868. And that gives us 6.44. What does it want us to round to? 1/10 of a meter. Okay, 1/10 again. This is the 10th spot. This is the 100th, 1000th, so on and so forth. So the 10th, we're going to leave it as 4 because this number is smaller than 5. So 6.4. And remember, what were the units here? We're dealing with centimeters. This is just a side length, so it's just simply centimeter. And there is your radius of your cone. Okay. But that's not what the question was asking for. The question was asking for the diameter. Okay, so we have one more step to do, and that's why it's always good to remind yourself, what the heck am I solving for? Okay, so what you're gonna do is, since we're solving for the diameter, right now we've solved for the radius. We figured what this is. Okay, this is our radius. It is 6.4. All we got to do to figure out the diameter is simply multiply our radius by 2. So the diameter will be 2 times 6.4. And I probably shouldn't have rounded that number, okay, because we're not quite done. So I'm just going to press the multiplication symbol. Answer simply means the last number that you solve for. So this is taking that number and putting it here and multiplying it by 2. That gives us 12.88. We want it to the 10th, so we're going to round this number up to 9, okay, because this number is greater than 5. So we're going to get the diameter being 12.9 centimeters. And then you are done. So that's your diameter. Okay, let's do one more question here. We're given, if the right pyramid's base has an area of A equaling 200 meters squared, the height is 40 meters tall, determine the volume. Recognize this is a prism, okay? Your top shape is the same as your bottom shape. Top shape, same as your bottom shape. So what does that mean we get to do? That means the area of this, so it's a rectangle. This is a rectangular, but not a prism. It's just simply a prism. So all you got to remember with it being a prism is the volume of any type of prism. So a prism's the top shape is the same as the bottom shape, equals area of base multiplying your height. Okay, and we talked about that, right? Area of base multiplying your height. So if you go up here, remember that's what we talked about. Anything where it's a right cylinder, a right rectangular prism, so on and so forth. Anytime we're dealing with the same shape, bottom and top, it's the area of the base multiplied by the height. So it's not really on your formula sheet, it's just something you got to remember, but it's not super hard to remember. Is the top shape the same as the bottom shape? Sure is. That means the volume, all you need to know is the area of the base multiplied by the height. Recognize they give us the area here. They tell us what the area of the base is. It's 200 meters cubed, so this is 200 meters squared, here. And the height, well, it gives us the height. It's 40 meters tall, so this is 40 meters tall. So the volume of this prism is simply equal to 200 multiplied by 40. If we plug that into our calculator, 200 multiplying 40 gives us 8,000 meters cubed. Don't forget your units. 8,000 meters cubed. Okay, so there's your volume. Now, it's really important to understand, always finish with your units. You should really be showing your units throughout the question. So like even here, I was kind of bad and I should have put centimeters cubed here. I should have put centimeters here and carried that forward. It helps you remember what you're doing, okay? So pretty much all these questions I was a little bad in. I should have always been putting the units as I went along. So this should have been meters cubed here, okay? Now remember, if something was confusing to you, please go back, rewatch the video, make sure you took all the notes. A lot of math is just writing and seeing, and like as you write, your brain is trying to figure out what you're writing. So it's a way to study, okay? If at one point, even if you've watched the video twice or watched this example twice, and it still doesn't make sense, come on in. But if things are going well right now, you should be ready to try out your AFL for 1 point. What are we on here? We're already on 1.5, check that out. So here, you should try 1.5 AFL. I forgot to type that in here. So you should be ready to do 1.5 AFL. Please give it a shot. Thanks for watching. Come ask questions. Bye.